guys, it's Gearhead and welcome to another video. And today, this video is butchered up a little bit quickly because I needed a video to upload today. And I managed to run out of gameplay somehow. But anyway, we're starting off with this controller comparison. We're comparing all the controllers for all the consoles that I own, which is the Gamecube, the PS2, the PS3, the PS4, and the Xbox One. I'm actually going to shift that there. But anyway, we're going to start off with the GameCube. You're probably wondering why I have 7 controllers here, and that's because I have one third party and one main controller for 2 of the 4 consoles. So let's start off with our GameCube controller. I'm actually going to unravel the cable on this one and show you guys everything about this controller. This is the actual GameCube controller that came with the Nintendo GameCube back when it was first released. You've got an A, B, X, Y, Z button. You also have a right trigger and a left trigger, a C stick, a 4-way D-pad, and an 8-way thumbstick as well. So I'm going to wind that back up and move on to another GameCube controller. I have 2. One that is a official Nintendo, and then I have a third-party controller, which is, I actually purchased this from Five Below. If you don't know what that is, it's it's like a store chain where they sell all sorts of toys and electronics for $5 or less. This is, of course, a Five Below controller. As you can see, it doesn't have the Nintendo inscription up here. Also, A, B, X, Y, and Z buttons, right trigger, left trigger, C stick, and standard 8-way thumbstick as well. Of course, if I were to compare the two, this controller has the more clunky buttons, I guess you could say. They're much more noisy. But yeah, that's the Five Below controller for the Nintendo GameCube. Like I said, one of my favorite controllers right now on an extremely old console. This is actually the only Nintendo console I've actually owned. Of course, it's not entirely mine. It's Lame Bob Gaming's more than it is mine. But it's definitely a really neat controller. So moving on, we have the Sony Dualshock 2. This is actually the only one left we've got for our PlayStation 2 because we've managed to kill so many that we haven't been able to find an actual Sony controller. This one has actually been broken as well. As you can see, it's got tape on the back because the wiring is all broken. But anyway, this is an official DualShock 2. Wired, you've got R2, L2, or R1, R2, L1, L2. You have your 4-way D-pad up here, your 2 analog sticks, your selected start buttons. You have the cross, square, triangle, and circle buttons, as well as your analog toggle button, which is always on PS2 games, I've noticed. But if you play a PS1 game like Gran Turismo 2, you will see the analog switch off, and you can press it to light it back up, which will allow you to use the thumbsticks. So moving on, next we have a Dream Gear Lava Glow wireless PS2 controller. This is a third-party controller, very similar to the Five Below controller. You have a 4-way D-pad up here, your L1 and L2, R2, R1 and R2 buttons, your cross, square, triangle, and circle buttons, as well as select start analog and your 2 analog sticks. Now, besides the obvious differences with this controller compared to the Sony controller is when it's wireless. I actually don't like sitting incredibly close to the television, contrary to how it sounds when I do gameplays and stuff like Forza. But the wireless controller makes where I can play my PS3 from my bed because I don't play it in the game room. I've actually debated moving it in here for a while, but I never did. But the only complaint I really had is the left thumbstick likes to stick to a certain direction. Sometimes I always have to balance it back out, which can be kind of problematic. And I also forgot to mention that they have R3 and L3 buttons, which is where you press the thumbsticks in, which I don't believe any other consoles do that. Well, my Xbox One controller does. Next up, moving on to my next console that I own, which is the Sony Playstation 3. This is a gold limited edition Sony DualShock 3. I don't know if it's actually limited edition, but I've owned this controller since 2013. It was originally a matte finish when I first got it, but I wore it down to a gloss because this is my primary controller. Everyone in the house uses it, despite it being my controller, really. 6-axis. I don't think this has the rumble feature, which is I know a certain PS3 controllers actually did have. You also have your R2 and R1, as well as your L2 and L1 buttons. They actually are triggers this time instead of buttons you have to press. You have your PS button, your selected start buttons. It's cross, square, triangle, and circle. R3, L3, 4-way D-pad, which is basically an 8-way now. I believe with that gen of consoles, and your 2 analog sticks. Now moving on to the current gen, we have a PlayStation 4 Dualshock 4 controller. You have your touchpad here, your share and option buttons, as well as your R2, R1, L2, and L1 buttons, again full of triggers. You have a LED strip there to tell you when the controller is powered on. You've also got your 2 analog sticks, R3 and L3, as well as your 8-way D-pad. Now, it's 8 direction, but it's not actually 8-way. I believe the only controller to do that in the market right now that's act like an official controller is the Xbox One Elite controller. It is a PlayStation 4 Elite controller, which is basically a DualShock 4 variant of the Xbox One Elite controller, which is third-party as well. So if I ever do get my hands on one of those, it's a $75 controller. I may do a review on that. But in comparison to the DualShock 3, the DualShock 4 is a heck of a lot more ergonomic. It's definitely a lot easier for me to hold. It's a lot easier to use. While I'm not a big fan of the touchpad, there's not a lot of games that use it. Of course, GTA is one of the only games where I actually have to press it to do anything. And the speaker on the controller is rarely used. But, you know, it's definitely a new step up. And I know the new PS4 Pro and PS4 Slim, the DualShock's been updated, and the LED strip is no longer down here. It is now up on the top of the touchpad. So that's a pretty neat thing as well. Now, moving on to the last controller for the last console I have, that is the Xbox One, which is the newest addition to the family. I have a Dust Shadow controller. You have your right trigger, right button, left button, as well as your 2 analog sticks. You have your view and menu buttons. I finally figured out what that button was called, because if you've been watching the GTA 5 car reviews, I never know the name of that button. You have your 4-way D-pad. And like I said on the Xbox One Elite controller, you can get an 8-way pad where you can press press up and left, up and right, down and left, etc. And you also get these little triggers and paddles on the back. But yeah, I forgot to mention not only with the Xbox controller, but with the PS2 wireless controller, they do run on AA batteries, as you can see, which for the PS2 controller makes sense because it's third party. The Xbox One, you can buy a $25 charge and play kit, which will replace the battery pack right here with an actual charge kit. Oops, I just powered on my console. Because I'm clumsy and I dropped my controller. But yeah, you know, you can have all of that. So that will do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.